Today's guest is Melissa Vera, who is a native of the picturesque landscapes of North Carolina, and she embodies the spirit of Southern charm and resilience with a passion for frugality, community engagement, and the art of authentic storytelling. She has carved a unique path in the digital realm as the creative force behind Adventures of a Frugal Mom blog and the captivating host of the Chats from the Blog Cabin podcast. Melissa's impact beyond or I guess, yeah, Melissa's impact extends beyond her birthplace. Commitment to fostering genuine connections and empowering others is evident in her philanthropic endeavors, particularly in initiatives focused on financial literacy, education, and mental health awareness. So, Melissa, thank you very much for being on. How are you doing today?
Uh, Fine. How are you doing? Thank you for having me on.
You're very welcome, and yeah, I'm doing pretty good. It's been a busy day, but like a good busy kind of day. So I'm excited to dive into all of these things with you. I know we had a bunch of chats prior to going live.
hmm
You did some of my assessments, etc. So we'll get into all those pieces, but I'd love to just know a little bit more about you, kind of beyond the bio. Like, how did you get to doing what you're doing? What are you all about?
I kind of fell into doing what I'm doing. I was actually a teacher, loved teaching. You could get me in front of a bunch of kids. I'd be so excited. My imagination would go wild. I had a degree in English and communications, but when I got in front of a bunch of peers or a bunch of people that were my age, I just could not function. Basically, I couldn't get up. I would not be having a podcast interview right now. I would not be talking about myself. I would just clam up. And one of my friends told me in 2000, I think it was around 2011, that I was, because I had stayed home and I had worked. No, let me go back because I'm rambling right now. I've lost my train of thought. um, One of my friends, my fellow teachers, had told me that I knew how to do all these coupons and deals. And that's how Adventures of Frugal Mom came about, the blog. But I learned quickly that coupon and deals websites are like, unless you get right on it and you're posting it before anybody else, by the time you actually get around to posting it, 500 other blogs may have posted the same thing. So I decided to segue into the lifestyle, and I was working on doing that part-time and teaching elementary school. But in 2014, the bottom fell out of my world. My youngest daughter uh, was diagnosed with epilepsy, but at the time we didn't know what it was. She had her first seizure. She was in sixth grade. And then we had a car accident, and I took a leave of absence because I tore my rotator cuff. And then my dad, who was my hero, the one that I always knew no matter what, he was going to be there, he was going to be encouraging. He was put in hospice care because he was dying from exposure of Agent Orange in Vietnam. And so I knew, with my dad being part of the school where I worked at and being such a big force there, that I could not go back in those hallways right after his death because I was still mourning his death. So I took a leave and said, okay, God, if this is what you want me to do, because my faith is huge for me, if this is what you want me to do, then show me the way to pave the way for me to actually go full time with blogging. And he did. And actually, right now, I'm sitting in the blog cabin, which is a she shed. I call it my blog cabin, but it's 50 yards outside my back door. I had said that one day I wanted to have my own office where I could just close the door. I didn't know at the time that it was going to be in my backyard. I thought it was going to be like I'd get in the car and drive somewhere. But I actually bought it in 2018. And with all the profits I made from blogging, my husband did the sweat equity, but I did everything inside. I designed everything. I purchased everything inside. My husband just did all the hard work, the hard labor. Um, and then in 2020, when COVID hit, I did not know that when I bought that 2018, when I bought the blog cabin, that in 2020, I was going to host a show, Chats in the Blog Cabin, from here, because I was not wanting to talk to people like that. I was like, okay, this is the place for me to go, for, not worry about what I have to do in the house, just to sit down and write. And I was behind a keyboard. I can do a whole bunch of things, but actually talking face to face with somebody, I could not do that. And yet I have met some amazing people on this journey. I've hit over 396 episodes, I think, right now.
Wow, congratulations! Not
Yeah.
just on the podcast, but I mean, like what a story bred out of like such bad
hmm
and like obviously unwanted circumstances,
Yes.
right? It's like one door closes, but then like a few others open, like as a result. So I just want to celebrate you for that resiliency, because I know it'd be easy to just kind of clamp down and not go forward with those
Yeah.
situations. So yeah, I just want to acknowledge you, for whatever it's worth of a stranger on the internet acknowledging you for that.
Mhm.
Because it's not a small feat, right? So yeah, I mean, anything else you want to add to that, but by all means.
Yeah. The whole time when I was going through this, I mentioned my dad always having my back, and I knew if I picked up the phone and I called my dad was going to be there. On the other hand, with my mom, it wasn't the same. Even though they were still together, it always felt like we've always said that my parents had two sets of kids. We had her kids and my dad's kids, even though they were both the same. We all four of us girls had the same parents. We were a same birth mom, same birth dad, but it was like my two older sisters because my dad was gone a lot during Vietnam. My mom bonded with them. She had that one-on-one time with them. So my dad wasn't around with them, but with my sister Karen and I, which is right, she was 3 years older than I was. With My dad was at the end of where he was retiring at the end of his military career, so he was present with us. So Karen and I were like his kids, like he did stuff with us. And so I never felt like I had the unconditional love from my mom. I never felt like if I picked up the phone and called my mom that she would 100% rush over. And she might have, unless my sisters needed her. My other sisters needed her, she'd go to them first, and I would be the afterthought. And later on in life, she would say, well, the only reason why I don't help you is because you have a husband and they don't. I'm like, well, don't penalize me because I am still married to my husband, who's, I didn't mention, but my husband is my rock. We've been married for almost 30 years. And he's a native of Mexico, came in here with absolutely nothing. And now we have two college graduate children, one that's working on her college degree, one the oldest one who's a college graduate, she's also working on her PhD right now. And so it's just for seeing what he came from and what they've come to accomplish. And out of the grandkids on um my husband's side, they're the only grandkids that have graduated college.
Wow. I mean, again, it's just like that same theme of from like these, you know, circumstances where something shouldn't come out, like
Mm-hmm.
something shouldn't come forward. These things blossom,
Awesome.
right? So kudos to you, and that's amazing to hear. So, yeah, I mean, I'd love to then kind of flip this around and segue into kind of what you came here for, because I know even just doing this is outside of your comfort zone, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I know in the input to kind of be on here, you were like, okay, well, I know I'm already aware there's like a fear of failure. I'm aware that I believe what others say about me, or that
Mm-hmm.
there's that like judgment that's happening. So for you to come on here and explore this in this way is a big step forward. So again, acknowledging you for that. And let's just start kind of generally, kind of what do you think I can best support you with today?
um Taking chances, honestly. I'm so scared about I think if I put stuff out in the universe, it's never going to happen, because I think if I vocalize that I want this, that it's going to say, oh, well, the universe is going to say, no, you can't have it. And so I never vocalize what I want, and I never pretty much go after what I want. I'm always got that little bit of fear in my mind. And I don't know if it's because of the way I was brought up with anytime I would say I wanted to go do something and my mom would say it's something a little bit negative, and it would totally put fear. Like when I turned 50, I went ziplining for the first time. I'm deathly afraid of heights, deathly afraid of heights. And I knew if I mentioned to my mom that I was going to go ziplining, she would have said something and I wouldn't have gone. But I took one of my friends with me, and we went and we had an amazing time. But I remember the first time when I was up there on that first thing, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't do this. I can't. I'm like shaking like a leaf. And she's like, just go, you can do it. And so I prayed. I was like, God, if you're going to take me quick. If I'm going to die here, just take me quick. And luckily, it was one of the zip lines that it had the anti brake, I mean, the brake system already. So you didn't have to worry about braking, because I think I would have definitely died if I had to worry about braking, because I wasn't focused on anything but getting through that first one.
Got it. Well, the interesting thing about that is you're like, okay, well, I have this fear of taking chances, and I have this inherent fear that, the universe, God, etc. Like it's not going to support
Hmm.
me to do what it is I want to do. So I hesitate to actually play bigger and say what I want. Yet, even just in the short time that I've conversed with you, you've mentioned multiple things where like you took big and small chances and things have
Hmm.
worked out really well in your favor. So, in your mind, how do you kind of balance out the evidence versus the fear?
I don't. That's the problem. Is
Okay,
I see things that, okay, if I see if it's a one time thing, I'm like, oh, it's a one time, it's a fluke. I don't see as a, oh, this is something I can continue on going further and further with. It's something, oh well, it's luck. It just happened. It wasn't planned. It wasn't this. And so anytime I feel like I have plans in place, that's when I feel like the failure is going to come because I planned. And when they always say when you plan for something, God makes you tell God your plans, but God has other plans. Well, I always feel like that part is in my mind, like, okay, well, I'm taking a leap, but yet this is happening. So why is this happening this way?
got it. Okay, so clearly there's this fear of, well, I can't actually have what I want. If I start taking active steps towards it, then I'll get confirmation that I actually can't have what I want, like something's going to
Hmm.
happen. Even though in the past I've got evidence that, well, things don't always work out how I planned, like you said, mentioned with the house, right? Like, well, I was wanting an office. I didn't imagine it would be my backyard, but it's actually my backyard that's actually better, right? So again, the evidence doesn't correlate with what you're describing. So if we zoom out a little bit, right? If we start to go at the core here, which is this is a great opportunity for you to actually vocalize something that you want. Okay. So why don't you just start by just telling me and us, I guess, something that you want? It doesn't have to be like a big grand thing, but whatever you're comfortable with sharing and vocalizing right now.
Um, I'm in the process of writing a book about my relationship with my mom and how it led me to kind of look for unconditional love, going deeper into my faith. So I want that book to be published. I know I have to go after it, but the steps that I have to go after it are kind of scary. I don't know exactly where to take. So I want to be able to say, hey, this is my book. Read it. I hope you love it. And even if somebody doesn't want to publish it, it's a validation that, oh my gosh, that's me too. That's my story as well.
Got it. Okay. Well, firstly, congratulations for vocalizing it in a public way. Two, so that's something you're not writing yet. Like you're kind of thinking about
I'm
it,
in the
or you've
process
started
of writing
writing.
it.
You are okay. So okay, so you're taking active steps towards the things that you actually want. Okay, so let's get even more specific. Then, what's the thing? Like, what's the part you are afraid to actually vocalize? Because you're already writing it. So what is it actually about?
Number one, I still have one sister that's still alive, and I'm afraid that she's not been the most supportive as well. She's a lot like my mom. Her and my mom were like this. They were like two peas in a pod. And so I feel like anything that I say, even though it's my feelings, that because I fought so hard to be heard and for people to say, hey, your feelings are valid, that she may just, I don't know the exact word I'm looking for, but it'll repercussions will come from her. And
Okay,
she's not the nicest person when she gets mad because she hits below the belt.
so okay, I'm just writing this down. So it's likely, given the history, that there will be
Mm-hmm.
repercussions from this.
Yep.
So let's just say if we assume that that is a likely scenario. So what comes up for you when I share that?
Dread, regret, just the ick feeling. I mean, it's like even after my mom just passed away in August, and so I waited until after she passed away to start writing the book because I'm like, I'm gonna do this out of respect for her and her feelings, not to write anything until she's gone. Because I
Hmm.
feel like no matter what I did, even if when I would vocalize something, that my voice wasn't heard, that when I would say, I'm okay with whatever you do, but please don't involve me in it. Then the very next step would be, well, you're going to have to do this. I'm like, did you not just hear what I said? And then when the times when I'm like, I need it, I need your help with something. Well, why do you need my help? You have a husband. And I'm like, regardless, no matter what age you are, you still need your mom. If you want to, I know right now my girls can pick up the phone and they know they can pick up the phone and call me anytime because I chose to create a relationship with my three girls that I didn't have with my mom because I didn't want that to continue on and be that cycle to go further and further and further. And looking back, and I have done a lot of growth on myself, and I think that's one of the reasons why I agreed to do this podcast with you, is looking back, I was my mom 10, 15 years ago. I took everything. Oh, if something bad happened, oh, it's all my fault. And I would blow up and I would yell at them and stuff. But then I was like, no, wait a second. Let me step back. And I wanted my girls to be able to come to me with any situation and be able to talk things out with me. And yeah, sometimes we have cry fest and we cry because that's emotions. Emotions get high, but they know at the end, no matter what, that I love them unconditionally. And that's the one thing with my mom. I didn't know that unconditionally. I did that she loved me. And I think the greatest thing that could be said is my oldest daughter told me one time, I don't think of you as my mom. And I was just like, really, the old me was like, oh, what? I'm your mom. I gave birth to you. Are you kidding me? You already look like your dad already. So please don't take that away from me. But she's like, no, mama, I think of you as my mom who oh, I think of you as a friend who happens to be my mom. And that was one of the greatest accomplishments. And I always say my greatest accomplishments in life were my three girls. And then my middle daughter, when my mom was going through all her stuff, she actually mentioned something happened in her childhood. And I was like, oh my gosh, the old me would have said, that never happened. And just kind of like ran over her feelings like my mom did me. But I looked at her and I said, I don't recall this happening, but if it did, I am so sorry because as parents, we make mistakes. And like I said, I've grown, but I know I need to grow even further. And that's why I think I agreed to come on this podcast now is to just talk through this stuff because it's hard.
Yeah, 100%. And the thing that I would reflect back to you is it sounds to me, at least this is in relation to the book, because you're really taking the hardest parts and you're doing them anyway, which is like
Mm-hmm.
actually writing it. Yes, okay, when you hit publish and like this goes out into the world,
Mm-hmm.
yes, there will be repercussions, but it's like, to me, what comes out from this is really you just have to put in the reps for your courage muscle. Like the growth to be able to verbalize all of this, to analyze, like there's sounds like there's a lot of catharsis in you,
Mm-hmm.
like doing the writing of this, making the decision to do it, writing it, and I think you're doing that already. It's just like the part that's not there yet is, well, the courage muscle of
Mm-hmm.
pressing, publish,
Yep.
shipping this out into the world, and then the courage that will be needed for the repercussions that are very likely to come. Like, you don't know 100% that they will, but like let's just say it's very likely given
They are going to
what you
come.
described, right? So
Yeah.
it's kind of like you can't, like, courage is one of those things that it only exists in the like space of fear. It doesn't exist outside, like in the absence of fear. Otherwise it's not actually courage,
Mm-hmm.
right? That is just kind of like some bravado or some version of that. So the only time you can actually exercise it is when you are scared, and it seems to me like you're doing things that you are scared of doing, but you're doing them anyway.
Yeah. But I'm doing
So
them in the privacy of my own home, not out in the world yet.
correct. And like you have to like make the book before you publish the book,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I guess my question or follow-up question to that is like, okay, well, is there parts of you that want to do more around this as you're writing the book that you feel like you're holding yourself back, or like what's coming up for you there?
Yes, there is definitely parts.
Okay. So tell me more about those.
I kind of, well, I told you I had a degree in English and communication, so I kind of want to go out and do. I thought I had the niche, and I did get bit by the bug. I was hosting a live show with Market Live. It's a tech company, but a DIY show for like I did 10 episodes, and I thought, oh, they were so great. People were getting a lot of feedback. The producers were giving me feedback, but then they decided, okay, we're not going to renew your contract. And that's just like, okay, that's another slap. Like, why did I put myself out there for this to come to me? And I have to flip my thinking, and sometimes I can't flip that thinking. I can't flip and say, this is stinking thinking, like my friend would say, it's stinking thinking. I can't flip that switch to put on that positive and to get myself out of that, and I tend to wallow. Like, I had someone that I was working closely with, and she's accepted a job somewhere else, and the first thing I thought was, why does this always happen to me? Why did I take the time to get into this relationship with this person business wise that was helping me, and like helping me all along, and now all of a sudden she's gone off and I'm stuck again. So I guess it's the fear of being left behind, the fear of being rejected, of not having, because I was the youngest, so I was always the one that was trickled down. Everything was trickled down to, and the youngest of four girls is horrible, because even though you were around us, all of us were around the same age. I was a lot smaller than them, and so I got all the hand me downs, all the, never had anything that was mine, and now this is something that's going to be mine and mine alone that I'm writing. And I'm afraid that someone's going to take my story and just take it away from me and tell me that this is not true, and just like bash me for telling my story.
Got it. Okay. So in that instance, there's like a preemptive negativity. It's like
Mm-hmm.
you're almost like imbuing the negativity into the project,
Mm-hmm.
preemptively being like, well, something's going to go wrong. Okay.
Yep. It's like kind of like putting a little protection of like bubble wrap around myself to protect myself from rejection and stuff.
Okay. So that's an interesting distinction, right? Because there's one, like, so I shared that, okay, this is like you preemptively imbuing like negativity into the project, like it's going to fail, right? Like, let's just say, for
Mm-hmm.
lack of a better word, that's the umbrella that encapsulates it. Okay. So normally, if that was in isolation, that's in the sphere of like, okay, well, like negative thinking, and I'm always like a downer, etc. And a lot of times that can stop action. Okay. In your instance, though, you're kind of doing the action anyway. Like we talk about
Mm-hmm.
that whole courage muscle thing, and then
Mm-hmm.
that should be celebrated, right? What's interesting is where your brain went to when I shared that is like, okay, well, that protection from all of that. Okay. So that's an interesting piece of information, because if it's protection, okay, then you really want to start looking at, okay, well, what is it protecting you from? So all
Mm-hmm.
this negative thinking, what is it actually protecting you from?
Honestly, I don't know. I don't know what it's. I guess it's protecting me. It's going back to the little girl that I was when, I felt like I was having to be seen and heard. It's protecting me from not basically being rejected, of being the person that totally, because even in my family they can't, my not the family, my immediate family, but the family I grew up with, they can't see the change in me because they're not around me enough now, because I had to put some boundaries in place. And I guess it's just them constantly putting myself back in that box as that little girl that's 6 or 7 years old, that is like, you're not worthy, nobody's gonna want you in your life, nobody's gonna want to do this, nobody's gonna want to do that. So constantly that little girl keeps coming out and saying, okay, I'm here to protect you. And that little girl needs to be healed so that she can go on about her business, and so I can, as a woman, go and do what I need to do.
Right. So it's actually cool because you know the quote unquote mechanics of what you need to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I need to heal the inner girl. I need to do all that work. And you're right. That's actually a lot of the work that I end up doing with my clients as well. So, one distinction that I just want to reflect back with regards to what you shared is it's the little girl saying all of these things. Okay. So, what I would invite you to just tune into is, is it actually the little girl saying all of these things, or is it the imprint of your like familial voices and narratives that saying that, and the little girl is still thinking she needs to operate in those spaces?
I think it's probably that.
Yeah.
Wow. Pooh, mind blown.
Okay, good. I'm glad that it's so. Why is that leaning? Why is that distinction different than what you would have?
Because then I know it's not something that I caused. It's not centered around me. It's centered around what happened or the people that were influencing that little girl
Mm-hmm.
instead of what is actually in my actual thought process, in my mind, in my whole being. It's not who I am. But it's hard to remember that when you're going through all that stuff.
Correct. And this is where the distinctions matter quite a bit, right? So the voice and the narrative and the repetition of more or less the same thing every time, like that kind of negative Nancy, for lack of a better term,
Mhm.
that constantly pops up. Okay, so that isn't your voice. It sounds like you, but it's not your voice. It's the voice you picked up from your upbringing. The little girl is there. She is receiving them, and she's basically trying to navigate adult situations while also needing the protection the little girl would have needed hearing
Mhm.
all of those things,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
So we're hardwired for safety to always go first. That girl is right now hardwired to not be safe in things where the light is on you, where you're shining.
Mhm.
So what's she going to do? She's going to trigger all of the voices that confirm that.
Yep.
And then she's going to look for protection with that, with like, okay, well, play small, don't write this thing, don't say that thing, don't go on that, like don't take the chances,
Yep.
as you say. That's where the protect. So the protection is coming from the little girl, but the actual voices, they're not yours. They sound like you, but they're not actually yours. Okay, so what lands for you with all of that?
You're right, honestly. But how do I get out of not in that little spot? How do I get out of rethinking that, and how do I get out of making sure that I know it's not, that I can succeed, not because of X, Y, and Z, somebody in the family saying I can't, but because I know personally that I can do this and that I can do the hard things.
Short answer is you join the Up Level Mind program and I help you do that. Long answer to that is basically, like I just say, jokes aside, like the process, let's just say that I would walk you through if we were working together, okay, is there's two things. So number one is you have to let go of the protections,
Mm.
right? So that inner critic, for example, that negative Nancy we talked about, okay, that part serves a subconscious role in your life. Like even though there's a lot of consequences of that part that stop you from writing the book and taking those chances and getting out there and all those things, subconsciously it operates under some sort of emotional logic that part thinks it's doing for your favor. And
Mm-hmm.
usually critical parts are like, you know it's basically the shoulds of our life. Like if you show up as you should, if you can be like this, if you can be like that, if you can not do this, then you will be okay,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's kind of like all those shoulds basically stand on these like foundations of, or rather the inner critic is built on the foundations of these should type beliefs. Okay, so you remove the need for the protection, and then what's left underneath is this vulnerable little girl. So then a big part of that is reconciling that little girl to be like, you really don't need to stay in the past any longer, right? Kind of getting her to
Mm-hmm.
recognize like you're just trying to operate as a little girl in adult type situations, and these things that you're afraid of, they're not actually relevant anymore. Like you also don't need to play the role that you've been playing within your life, right? And then cumulatively, that reconciliation process is basically clearing the thoughts and the beliefs around both of these parts,
Mm-hmm.
and then letting go of the emotions of this. So like you mentioned abandonment a lot, you mentioned like hand me downs, you mentioned rejection. Like you also have to clear the emotional baggage of that, so there's nothing kind of attaching you to these old patterns. And then the last part of with this whole kind of process is then embodying it in your day to day. So let's just say if we clear this in session,
Mm-hmm.
then I got to go embody it when I'm sitting down to write, when I am going out to promoting the book, right? Like more of those things will trigger like what's still left kind of unhealed and uncleared. But unless you embody it and you kind of walk in the healing, it's kind of like, okay, it was a fun process, but like, where's the result?
Yeah.
You get the result from the up leveled actions, right? Like that's kind of the last step in the process to really solidify everything. So what comes up for you with that share?
I don't know. There's a lot of conflicting emotions because it's almost like I know I can, but there's every time I do something, it's like I know I can, but I know I can do this, but I can't. But I know I can do this, but that big but always comes up, and it's like there's so many things that I don't even think twice about talking about on the podcast, but then there's others that I'm like I can't talk about because of the repercussions. I mean, I've been vocal since my mom passed away about saying, "Hey, this is how I felt. This is, the whole story was not told. Now my story is going to be coming out, and that's why I'm doing these interviews and doing everything else." But I just feel like there's that. I guess it goes back to people not believing my story, even though it's my story and there's truth in the story. And I heard somebody, I was actually interviewing somebody for my podcast the other day, and she said that our recollections of events for trauma and things like that, she's like, it could be, it's, it may not be what actually happened, but it's what we in our mind has trained ourselves to remember. And that stuck with me. And I'm like, oh, I didn't even think about that. Because there's been a lot of statements that come up from when I was younger that like have really like impacted the way I was as a young mom, the way I was as a young wife, as the way I was as a sister. I didn't tell you, but when I was 6 months pregnant with my oldest daughter, the sister that was next to me in age, who was my best friend growing up, she was my best friend. Period. She passed away from cancer. And so when I lost her, I felt like I lost that piece that was holding me to the family. And then I totally lost the piece that held me to the family when I lost my dad. And when I voiced to my mom one time that I felt like I wasn't part of the family because Karen wasn't there, and I was wearing a big age gap between my sisters and I now. And my mom's like, "Oh, you're crazy. It's all in your head." And so that validation of being heard and saying my feelings are valid. I don't understand what you're saying. I don't understand why you feel this way. She could have come out and said that, but I get it. You feel this way. Let's see what we can do to work on it. And my mom never did that. My mom was always telling me I was crazy and that it was all in my head and that I needed to get over it and all this stuff. And then she would get mad because I didn't want to be around that. I wanted to do boundaries. And the same way with my sister. And when my mom died, my sister was talking about how she was having conversations with my cousins about me in the background, and I could overhear some of it. And I'm like, it's not the whole story. You don't know the whole story. And it's like when she died, I grieved her, but I didn't grieve her. I felt guilty because, when your mom dies, you're supposed to be all upset and like, but I actually felt like this big like load came off my shoulder and I was at peace with her death. And it wasn't like when my dad died. When my dad died, I still grieve my dad to this day. I mean, this is the first time that I've not been able to go to his grave and not cry. And that would happen in 2015. So it's hard. The relationship is hard. And she did such a number on me that it's hard to even try to break out of that.
Yeah, you're 110% right. And I know you shared a lot of things, and I'll kind of comment on the umbrella reflection back, which is at the end of the day, there is no like relationship with your mom other than the relationship you have with your ideas of her,
Mm-hmm.
right? And what I mean by that is like the piece that you mentioned around like parents like passing away or like something happening and then like this load being lifted off, that's actually very common because oftentimes, especially with patterns like yours, where my voice was pressed down and suppressed and judged and all of the things, we always have issues voicing what it is that we want to say. So whatever baggage we've carried and not said also gets released with the passing of the parent. Like energetically, they do the same work we could have done on our own consciously, but and there's no judgment, but for whatever reason, we didn't know how to do it on our own. So what I'm saying this is right now is all of these baggage, for lack of again of words, with your sister and the other players here, or whoever you think is judging you. The first person that's judging you is actually
So,
yourself.
yeah.
Like it is the archetype of that person, the symbol of that person is saying what we anticipate that person saying. So in many ways, we prejudge ourselves before the other person actually has a chance to judge ourselves. Part of that is for you said protection. Part of that is
Mm-hmm.
just that's how our brains work. So
Yep.
if you're thinking about how do I heal this, you don't have to wait till somebody passes away. You can actually do that right now. Or the flip side of that coin is when I have individuals or clients where like, well, my parent passed away and I can't even say this anymore. Or like if there was like hurt or like anger that they still harbor, well, I can't even get angry at them because they're passed away. Well, yes, physically that is true, but internally, emotionally, mentally, you can actually do all of the anger work because the only person you have to say it to is the version of them inside of your head. And if you can reconcile that, that's where you have a lot of the peace, right? So now bringing this back to what you were describing at the beginning, it's like if all of these patterns are getting in the way of me, sharing my story, getting onto bigger stages, doing all of the things you want to do, right? We didn't even get into like expanding business and all that, but I'm assuming part of this whole process is to make that bigger as well. It's like, well, the process can happen when you begin to just heal internally, like recognizing where's the source of these, beginning to reconcile, like all of the things we've already talked about. So anyway, I know I'm kind of sharing a bunch of different things your way, but what's landing, what isn't?
The one thing that landed with me is when you talked about getting on bigger stages. That's almost like you're reading my mind right now because that is what I want to do. And that is my goal is to get up and speak and tell my story and let other people know because I think when I was writing one day I read a blog post and it was way back before, I think even before I got the blog cabin. And one of my friends told me, he was another fellow blogger, you can't write stuff like that on the internet because it was like my true feelings and everything. And I'm like, well, why can't I write something like that on the internet? And she's like, well, that's not the way you're supposed to write things, because most bloggers sometimes they do like very factual stuff where I write with a lot of feelings, and I think that's one of the reasons why I stand out so much. And that really like got me down, but in the same frame of mind within 2 days I had a friend come up and said, I am so glad you wrote that blog post because I thought I was the only one that felt this way. And I have to keep remembering that I'm not the only one that feels this way, that I'm not the only one that struggles with this. And if I'm struggling with this and somebody else is struggling with it, and that my story is going to tell, me getting up on stage or getting on the podcast and talking about my story is going to help somebody else with their story.
Correct. And that's the part that can pull you through some of
Mm-hmm.
these, like the inertia
Mm-hmm.
of all of the past wounding, 110%. And what we talked about before with the repercussions, part of getting onto bigger stages and being like visible, like shining your light more, is that it's actually a mirror for other people. And sometimes when you shine brighter, that mirror is too much for other people to handle. So it's easier to pull you down than it is to actually kind of raise up to your level. Okay. Which is exactly why that light that you shown with that, emotional blog post, to one person, it's triggering the part that they don't want to look because you're
Mm-hmm.
shining a light onto their shadow and they're not ready yet to face it. On the other person, like they're receiving it as like, okay, well, this is the healing things of like, I'm not alone and like all the
Mm-hmm.
other parts that come with sharing. So it's a double-edged sword. You have to accept the polarity. And that's why a big benefit to doing this work now in this way and clearing all of these things is when you are in a position to step onto the larger stages, you will be in a position to take that opportunity. And if the opportunity does come, you don't sabotage it because there's not all of this wounding and inertia
Mm-hmm.
coming your way. So that's kind of like getting ready for the bigger things, right? Like
Yeah.
accepting more of the things, or put a different way, because you mentioned it or alluded to it at the beginning of the episode, it's like, what God or the universe wants of me right now, like where it wants me to go, what it wants me to express, or what it wants to express through me, requires that I let go of these things so I can actually play the bigger game.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like you can't pour a gallon into a shot glass. You
Yeah.
got to get a bigger container to pour more of that stuff into. And that's really what you're describing with all of these wishes. Like I want to eliminate and clear all of these things so I can be a bigger container for the things that want to come through me.
Yep.
So questions, comments, or concerns about that?
I totally agree with you. I 100% agree. And it's like, I want to be up on that stage. I want to be out there telling my story, but there's that but they see. And it's not even a but that I can even vocalize. It's just that but. It's like, it's because I can't even vocalize it. I'm always waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Yeah.
And it's
And
like,
that's a
I,
part of the hesitation, right? Like that's the justification as the protection,
mm-hmm.
but really it's playing small,
Yep.
right? Like that's ultimately what it results in.
Yep.
So anyway, I know that there's like I wish I could, heal all of these things for you. Like on a call like this in this container does
Mm-hmm.
require a lot of deeper kind of
Mm-hmm.
ongoing work. And I want to be conscious of time as well. So in terms of just kind of mapping this out in a different way, in terms of seeing how all of your patterns interact and kind of create the results or lack of results in certain areas, is this clear for you, or is there still something left outstanding?
I think it's pretty clear. I think
Okay, good.
the biggest thing that you made me think about was it wasn't the little girl as being protective. It was the input, and I'm thinking it's the little girl, but it was the input that was said to the little girl. And I think once I cleared that out, then clear sailing ahead.
Yeah, yeah, that's going to be a big part of it for sure. So I'm glad that that landed for you. Okay, perfect. Well, I mean, if that is kind of feels complete for you, I'd love for you to just close us off and let everybody know, where to find you, who's the best person to find you. Floor is yours for that.
Okay, so you can find me on my blog. It's Adventures of Frugal Mom. But if you're looking for the URL, it's adventuresfrugalmom.com. Do not put an A there. There's no A there. Everybody puts Adventures of a Frugal Mom, but it's not. There's no A. Um, Chats from the Blog Cabin podcast can be heard anywhere you hear podcast episodes. If you want to hop over to YouTube, type in either Melissa Vera or Chats from the Blog Cabin, it should come up. Or on Instagram, it's Frugal Mom.
Love it. Well, as always, we'll include all of that in the show notes. Melissa, thank you very much for coming on. Yeah, for everybody else listening, we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you so much.